Hi and welcome to episode 58 of China Tools, a series of videos where we put woodworking tools from China to the test. And this is the second Double 11 edition, and my first episode was about this beautiful sharpening system that sets new standards. And I want to give it a decent in-depth review, so there was no time left for other products. But in this video I want to show several products and give my opinion. So here we go. And the first product seems somewhat familiar. It's a component of the router table I reviewed in episode 55. And there's nothing wrong with that because it's a clever part of that router table. However, in this instance we use it as a trim router base. And for better control, a trim router base is a valuable addition to your trim router. It's a very clever design. It's simple, but it will fit on a wide variety of routers. And this works perfectly. It is made from aluminum and has a final acrylic underside for a smooth surface. And I made a base for my trim router myself, and I hardly use it without it. It gives me much better control and prevents failures, especially with edge trim. However, this trim base is much broader than the version I made myself. And this does not make one better or worse than the other, but it initially felt a bit oversized for me. But the more I worked with it, the more I liked it. In fact, edge trimming feels very secure. Especially at the corners, you benefit from the larger platform and practically eliminate failures often occurring when working with a small trim router base. You will get splinters when you want to create a chamfer on an end grain board. And to prevent this from happening, I always trim the edge in the direction of the router bit rotation in these cases. And of course you have to take some care with this. And I would not recommend doing this with a small platform. But with this solid base I have enough control over my router to keep it steady. And you may have already done so if you can create a base like this yourself. However, when I compare to my homemade base, I found that the Enjoywood base is much more solid. And at just 27 euros you receive a well-finished, sturdy router base that fits almost every router. And this tool will not end up collecting dust in your drawers. I believe your handheld router will remain attached to this because it offers so much greater convenience in most situations. So overall, it's well worth the investment. And this is my scoring card. I frequently show you this Doweling Jig from Enjoywood and tell you that it is one of the most straightforward Doweling jigs you can get for cabinet making. And in episode 28 I did a speed test on how it would compare to my Vessel Domino. And it works practically as fast and is just as fun to work with. And they offer it now for only 58 euros from the European warehouse, which is 25 euro less than during this review. But I have had some questions lately about the Forstner bit they use for this device. They seem to be very specific, so I'm glad to inform you that you can now buy these Forstner bits for these Doweling jigs separately. And I have placed a link in the description of this video. The following product is this adjustable rail guide square. And it can be an interesting tool for working with a track saw and a rail guide. And at first sight, it looks very nice. It's not a high-end tool, but for 37 euros, I'm amazed that they can create something so lovely. But when I get a product like this, in this price category, that requires 100% accuracy and needs to be attached to another product, I have to be honest that my initial idea is that this is unrealistic. And when I check the accuracy as a square, I must say it's perfectly square, which is promising. So to test the accuracy, I first cut a sheet of plywood on my table saw, ensuring that the side was perfectly straight. And it's always nice to get confirmation that I can trust my felder. Unfortunately, after my first cut there was a slight deviation. So I tried again and again and again and again, but there was always a slight deviation. And when I tried using my reference rail square, it was perfect, so it is certainly possible. So I want to give it one last chance, but it did not change the outcome. And you see that this deviation is just a little, but when you have a product that requires 100% accuracy, there's a thin line between good and bad. And of course the same counts when I cut it at an angle. And I believe the product is well engineered, but the issue lies with the connection to the rail square. There's too much play, and when you tighten it, it does not settle itself in the exact position. So despite its appealing look and affordable price, I can't recommend this product at this moment. The next product is this mighty case, also from Enjoywood, and it comes perfectly packed in 2 boxes. And it's good to see how much packaging has improved over time. And at first sight, this angle gauge looks very impressive. It looks a bit like the Harvey mighty cage, and I do not always follow the idea of making it look like another competitor, because besides its look, it is an entirely different mighty cage. And it is not that they made it worse. They include many more features you will not find on the Harvey. So let's see what it has to offer. I think this mighty cage is an impressive engineered product. It does not have the same quality level as the Harvey, but it's also not that far off. So here I will stop the comparison with Harvey because they do not have more in common. The tool includes several positive stops at the most commonly used angles, and I believe these positive stops are essential when creating more complex shapes, like a hexagon. And this is because even a slight deviation will magnify it by a factor of 12 in the case of a hexagon. And if you are interested, look at my video on the Hongdui mighty gauge, where I demonstrate how even 1/10 of a millimeter deviation affects accuracy. And at the front of the mighty gauge you have 4 adjustment screws by which you can align your fence so it's perfectly straight in all directions. And in practice it just didn't need any adjustments. The fence was perfectly aligned by itself, but it's good that they create the possibility. The angle settings run very smoothly, and I was initially afraid it would not settle itself clearly enough at the positive stops. So I wanted to see how easy it was to create a certain angle, and more importantly how accurately these positive stops are positioned. And this works flawlessly. It was perfectly square out of the box, although you can adjust misalignment at the mighty gauge when necessary. And the accuracy is very impressive at all the positive stops I tested. And also when I wanted an angle without a positive stop, I could set it accurately. The fence includes a reliable micro adjuster that, when tightened, remains stable without any play. And I was pretty impressed with its accuracy. I adjusted it 1 millimeter and that was spot on. The flip stop is designed to hold a screw, allowing you to set it precisely to the 0 position. And the flip stop and micro adjuster combination is straight and sturdy with only minimum flex in the arm. The fence is also a telescope fence with a straightforward yet effective method for setting the rulers. And while it may not match the mighty gauge in terms of quality, the fence is perfectly straight and has a well-designed structure. However, it lacks the sophistication of the highest quality fences. And the biggest advantage though is that you can use it on both sides of your blade. However, in the case you place this mighty fence combination at the right side of your table, you have to mirror the flip stop. So to summarize, this is a mighty gauge fence combination in the €200 price range, which is competitive. However, it's a very accurate mighty gauge and the fence is practically and good. And during Double 11 they offer it for €165 from a European warehouse. And for that price you cannot go wrong with this combination. And this is my scoring card. I thought that I had to review and rate the former mighty gauge as a product on its own. And it's a shame that the price difference between the China and European warehouse is so big. For $200 I think I would rate it 4 stars. Problem is that although I think it is a perfect mighty gauge for the price, when I compare it with the Hongdui mighty gauge, the Hongdui mighty gauge is clearly a step above it in terms of quality and design. And now during Double 11 the Hongdui sells for less than €220. The mighty gauge is very innovative with positive stop at every angle degree. And the fence fit and finish is the best you can get. And this is a big step above this Enjoywood fence I just showed you. The only drawback of this Hongdui fence is that you can only use it on the left side of your table. And I reviewed the Hongdui mitre gauge in episode 40, and you should watch that video if you are searching for a high quality mitre gauge and fence combination. Regardless of price, I still believe it is the best mitre gauge and fence combination available right now. And it is just impressive that they can offer it for under 220 euros. And I would like to point out that they now offer this combination of mitre gauge and fence specifically for the Bosch table saws. And if you own a Bosch table saw and are looking to upgrade your mitre gauge, this option is the best available. And the last product I want to mention is this router slab, designed to flattening the surface of your end grain cutting board or wire glue up panels, especially when they are broader than your thickness. And it comes perfectly packed, but it took me some time to figure out how to connect every part because some of the screws were mixed up with each other. And while I initially imagined placing it with the text facing outwards, I later realized that it should actually be positioned with the text facing inwards, as this simplifies alignment. And there's a crossbar that you can center this way with a pin. And this way you can install your router precisely at the sled center. And I do not think this is crucial, but that is its purpose. So a decent manual would be helpful, and I believe that it comes now with a decent manual. Besides that, of course, installing this router sled is quite straightforward. And once installed, the sled is sturdy and feels secure. And the price during the Double 11 festival is around 90 euros. And while this is a significant amount, I can't say they cut corners regarding the material used. And lately I have created a few special stands for a highly modified Apple TV. And the base for this stand is similar to an end grain cutting board. And I usually place my end grain cutting boards through my thickness. However, there is some controversy about this idea. There are many examples of end grain cutting boards exploding in your thickness. So basically it is no go. And I dare to do it because my thickness is very stable and use a spiral cutter block. And I first make a chamfer on all the edges and I only cut off 1 or 2/10 of a millimeter with every pass. But the right way of doing it is with a router sled or a drum sander. So I was curious how it would work. And what I always do first is create a chamfer at the edges. And this way you will not have splinters at the end or beginning when you use your router sled. And there are 3 levels to set the height of the sled. And although the crossbars are very sturdy, they are also pretty thick. So I was curious if there would be a gap between height settings. And with my fast tool the bit comes 30 mm under the router base itself. And the crossbars are 50 mm thick, so I have a maximum depth of 50 mm. And the height levels are 20 mm apart, so there is a gap of 5 mm in between the levels in my case. And unfortunately the thickness of my cutting board was right in this gap. So I had to work around it to lift my base slightly with some 6 mm MDF. And to be clear, I do not think this is a product failure because I do not have this issue with my AEG router, and when I had a more extended bit, this problem would also not occur. And I can recommend making a cutting board larger than you want so you can cut it at the right dimensions later. And so you can clean up the edges as well. However, you see that when you first make a chamfer, there is no tear out or splinters. But besides that, I have to say that it works very straightforwardly and I found the result better than expected. In fact, I did not notice any line where one pass crossed the other. It looks like it came from my thickness. So to summarize, I found the result to be better than expected it to be. And when I look at the router sled itself, it is a very sturdy base and does not flex in the middle. Setup is easy, especially when you have experienced it once, and I think it's a perfect sled for what it needs to do. And I have to be honest that walking with the sled feels safer than with a thickness. There's always a little voice in my head saying this goes wrong one day, but it is quite messy when you use a sled. So for end grain boards, the best is to go for a router sled or a sander. And when using a router sled, I think this one does everything you wish for. And this is my scoring card. Well, that was the end of this video. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments. The Double 11 festival ends in a few days, so keep that in mind. Do not forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we will see each other next time.